G'day there, everyone. Daniel Anderson here. Welcome to this edition. Now, joining me today for a very special edition, I have got Microsoft MVP royalty in the house, Matthew Gilbertson and Darrell Webster joining me. So before we get into the topic of today, welcome, Darrell.
Hello. I'm waiting for the trumpets and the fanfare, and
I don't have. Sorry, I'm not as polished as you. I haven't got the sound effects, but. Welcome. Okay. Nice to see you, mate.
Maybe I'll do the trumpets for Matt, okay? So, trumpets for Matt.
No trumpets needed. Yes, royalty I'm not sure of. MVPs maybe, but royalties, not really.
Well, let's stick with you, Matt. For everybody watching and listening, tell everybody, well, if you're not royalty, tell everybody who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm a productivity specialist is my official job title. Work for a company called ASI Solutions these days. But my brother and I started talking to people about using tablets, having used tablet PCs ourselves from the early 2000s, starting in about 2003. And even before that, using touch interfaces and also PDAs. Not many people will know what they are these days.
PDAs?
Yeah. Pen-based computing really is, I suppose, where I started. And, but these days we just find it continually interesting and surprising that people, we were talking about this just before we got on, Daniel, that, we're going to talk about some really cool technology today, but most of the people that I speak to on a daily basis still don't know where their files live and how to split their screens and do all these very basic functions because they've never been trained on using technology. So that's what I do every day, is just help people use the tools they've got a bit better.
And somebody that probably doesn't need too much of an introduction for people watching and listening, Mr. Darrell Webster, tell everybody about yourself and what's keeping you busy at the moment.
Oh, same as Matt. Moving on. I'm also right into helping people with the training technology. I enjoy jumping on both sides of the fence. So on one side in a project, I might be preparing change management and comms and training and creating awareness and all that lovely stuff. And on the other side, I might be helping out with configuring things and trying to hit best practice. I think what I enjoy is sometimes sitting on that fence and making sure that the user experience matches the design and that, best practice is actually best experience too. I'm out on my own as modern work mentor and enjoying that. Got some dreams of what I'd like to do with that name and that business, but that's me at the moment.
Very good. Now, onto the topic of today, and Matt, you mentioned before, look, we're going to be talking about some pretty cool technology that is coming, or as actually is already there. And the topic we're going to be talking about is really around a new era of collaborative note-taking inside of Microsoft Teams. So recently we've seen this, terminology about the new era of SharePoint and OneDrive coming as well. But we've got this, I'll say competing, but it can also and probably should be thought about being complementary aspect inside of Microsoft Teams, and specifically around note-taking, where the old school wiki tab in Microsoft Teams and channels has been replaced by a OneNote powered notes tab. And recently we've just seen the introduction of collaborative meeting notes powered by Microsoft Loop. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Now, Matt, I want to start with you, and I want to start around OneNote. Mm-hmm. Now, there's been a lot of research over many, many years about, the different areas of the brain, for example, that get activated and that type of thing when you're using a stylus and you're writing notes, or a lot of it's centered around education, primarily, but it does transfer into business as well. When we're sitting in meetings and we're actually writing the notes and keeping up to date and that type of thing. Tell me a little bit about that research and your understanding of that, first of all.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So there is this note-taking confusion, if you like. You mentioned old school wiki, for example, in Teams. Going back before wiki in Teams, though, there was OneNote. OneNote started as the Teams note-taking app in Teams. It went away. It came back. Is it there now? Is it not? Where do we take notes? But what hasn't changed in the era of technology that I've been living through, which is the last 40 years, from a schoolboy through to a working person of technology, is the way the brain works. We think maybe that kids today might be different, but they're actually not in the way the brain works. And some research done by Professors Van der Wiel and Van der Meer from Norway, they put, I think they're called EEG nets, over people's heads to measure the electrical pulses that go on when we type at a keyboard versus when we write. And in short, the results showed pretty clearly that the brain is far more active when people draw or write than it is when you type on a keyboard. So what that means is that when it comes to taking notes and encoding memories, using a pen makes far more hooks available to the brain. So there's so much more there for our brain to hang on to when we're drawing as opposed to typing. And I suppose from my personal note-taking coaching philosophy is that, notes are so many different things to so many different people, but there is actually a chronology of the way notes evolve. Most people still go to pen and paper, sticky notes, back of envelopes, coasters, etc., to quickly capture a memory or an idea. And then they might go to a keyboard to structure that, and then they'll build it with other people. And I think this, I always ask people in a lot of my training sessions, what does collaboration mean to you? Because by definition, it simply means working together. So we're working together today, but are we actually building anything? So when we say we want better collaboration, what are we actually asking for? Most people tell me they actually want the better sharing and development of ideas. And the research tells us that ideas live in free-form modalities, ink, imagery, visual processing in the human brain, and not in text. In fact, when we go to text, people start talking about format. I like clean, clear, neat, organized bullet points, lists. That format comes at a sacrifice of human creativity. The research is more and more compelling in this space. So, yeah, that's the background of the gap in the note-taking space. And now it's not a gap in people's work lives because they're actually doing all this on paper. The challenge of doing it in paper is if I do it in paper, it costs me so much unnecessary time to reform those notes into something digital, right, and build them somewhere else. Could I find a medium that lets me use that great creative human thinking and take it digital? And I do see that what we're going to be talking about today with Loop integrated particularly into tools like OneNote, and then we can add Copilot to that, could be really, really powerful. Yeah. So this ideation space into maybe a forming of structure, into publishing something, there's some really compelling stories that we're looking forward to seeing there.
So obviously OneNote's been around for quite some time.
Years.
And Darrell, we've now seen the introduction of Microsoft Loop. You are probably the guru and the go-to person around Microsoft Loop globally at the moment. So maybe you can give us a little bit of an insight, because I know you probably come across this as well, but I know people still are, if I ask people about, have you seen Microsoft Loop, have you heard about it, et cetera, a lot of people actually don't even know what it is. So maybe let's start by your take on or your explanation of what Microsoft Loop is.
Yeah. I think it starts again at the idea space. That's really the intention of the product. And it's interesting, part of the reason why people don't know much about Loop is because it wasn't really introduced in a traditional way that an app might be introduced. It was this tiny little thing at the bottom of a Teams chat, and you may or may not click it. And if you did click it, you might have been confused. Like, what is this thing? It's popping something up there. But the idea was that if you were in a conversation and you needed to quickly create a space to be able to work together, that you would click this button, it would pop up a blank box where you could pop in a title, you could send it off to the person in the chat, and you could start working together. And a bit like how Matt was talking about with being able to grab a pen and start writing and doing your ideas. There's no choice there in terms of font. There's no, what color pen or anything like that. You just do it. And you're removing some of those initial choices that might actually be distractions from coming up with your idea. So that was one of the intentions with Loop, whereas it's actually, it's still a typing thing, but it's added to that chat. It also helped to remove some of those choices around, okay, well, maybe if we were doing it digitally, we could be held up by, well, which notebook, which team, which document, all these things that we might have to make choices before we start working on things together. And that was actually kind of the funny thing about, you'd actually see it sometimes in meetings where people would just go, let's just write the notes and chat, literally, in a conversation and type it. So that's how I used to tell people about how this first experience of Loop is. But it's grown from there. See, that what we're talking about initially is what's called a Loop component. And the idea is that when you are adding that space to collaborate together to your conversation, it's creating a file in the background, a new kind of file in Office called a Loop file. In that instance, it's stored in your OneDrive, and we'll probably get into this a bit later. But again, not trying to think about where to store it and what to store it. Let's just get that idea out there on that scrap of digital paper and make it available for the people in our chat. And, over time, we've seen the Loop component and various other starting points for Loop appear. And the other thing I'd say about Loop too is that sometimes you need a bit of a kickstart in terms of, okay, we don't just want a blank piece of paper. We want a bullet point list, a table, a task list or something. So it's about providing those quick starting points based on what your needs are. And since then, after that challenge of Loop and, it just being this obscure little component thing at the bottom of different apps, they finally came out with the application that brings it all together. So much like, a bit like a OneNote structured notebook in terms of like pages and subpages, it feels a bit like that. It also feels a bit like other applications and Canvas applications that we've seen as well. But what I see now with components available, the Loop app available, we're actually completing the loop of Loop, and that now you're able to sort of come up with those ideas in the place that you're currently working, and you're able to bring it together into a workspace where you might have a group of people that are working together further on those ideas. I haven't really thought of summarizing it like that before.
No,
hopefully that hits the notes.
It does.
Notes.
Look, it's notes. Yes, it does, absolutely. And I think, both sort of OneNote and Loop can be thought of, fairly similarly, I guess. Now, Matt, with OneNote, outside of, we'll come back to meeting notes in a minute, but what are some typical use cases that you're seeing OneNote, traditionally used for?
Yeah, well, I can give you my own personal experience. So, I started using it in 2003, and I had been using Microsoft Journal before that. And so OneNote was an extension where we could actually collect individual journal pages into notebooks, and we have that concept. And I've actually got open, today in my OneNote file, 20 years worth of notes. So what I have in there is any meeting I've been at in the last 20 years, I have the notes from that meeting, and you'll find mostly my handwritten notes, occasionally typed notes, but mostly my handwritten notes from those meetings. Any research that I've discovered that relates to topics that I'm interested in or that we work with, that's been clipped from the web or other places and stored in OneNote as a library of information. Shared notes, shared meeting notes. There are printouts, images, video references, all sorts of content here in these pages. So, basically anything that I don't know where it's going to end up starts in a OneNote page is the way I work. And from there, plenty of these pages would have become Word documents or PowerPoint slide decks or other things. But before I was aware of where they needed to go, they probably started as OneNote. Or even if I wasn't sure why I needed to keep them, but I knew I wanted that later, that's where it ended up.
So do you think with I guess the introduction now of the new tab, the new Notes tab in Microsoft Teams, we're going to see a lot more a lot more use of OneNote, I guess, both for team note taking, but specifically around meetings. What are some best practices around how are we structuring? I get a lot of questions actually about how do we structure? How do we take notes in meetings? How do we structure things? Do we have a page per meeting? Do we how do we actually start? So what are some best practices around that sort of things?
I'm interested to hear what Darrell has to say in this as well, but I'll give you the starting point. I think this moves beyond OneNote. When we talk about meetings, we want to talk about the loop of a meeting, if you like, or the cycle of a meeting. And that is, have we actually done the work before the meeting? So do people know why they're coming? Do they have an agenda they can see? Are they prepared for the meeting? I think when I ask people, most people say that more than 50% of their meetings are unstructured and unplanned. And there are relevant times when that's important, but I'm not sure it's 50% of the time that we should have unplanned meetings. Is it fair to expect people to give you their best without the opportunity to prepare what they want to talk about? You gave us some time to prepare this, Daniel. We had a couple of weeks' notice to do some research and to think about what we wanted to say. Whether we took it or not, we had the time to do it. But have we pointed people to a place that they can go to prepare for this meeting? Now, we coach OneNote as that space because I can put the link to the OneNote page in a shared notebook into the meeting appointment, even if it is a Teams meeting. We can put hyperlinks, we can put anything into that page. The page can include the meeting details. You can insert the meeting details into the page, which references back to your Outlook appointment, etc. And we can write notes. I love the transcribe feature in Teams /OneNote, etc., because the days of a minute taker in meetings should be finished. We should never have a person dedicated to taking the minutes of a meeting when technology can do it for us. The minute taker can't participate in the meeting because you can't take those notes like a stenographer and listen. So we're wasting a person's thinking capability if they're taking the minutes of the meeting. So let's make that happen automatically. But what would our notes look like if every individual in the meeting had planned, prepared, got there, and then during the meeting took notes about what mattered to them or what struck them as important individually? Now, if the three of us, for example, there's only three of us. I'm looking at your picture above me going forward, but there's only three of us. Three of us in the meeting. We're in a meeting, and we each took down our own perspectives. Oh, that's really important. Oh, yeah, I got to circle that point because that's a great one from Darrell. What would that collective set of notes look like then if we reviewed it together after the fact? Wouldn't that be a sharing? Wouldn't that be collaboration on ideas? That's an opportunity to learn from and influence the ideas of others. So that's, and from there, we can actually form decisions to go, this is the path we're going down, and these notes, these matter, these ones not so much, this is the path we're going. Here's our outcomes. That can become to-do lists, whatever we need to. I don't see, in our experience, without coaching, I see none of that meeting practice, frankly, out there in the wild, as it were. I see plenty of people who go to meetings and feel like they're wasting their time.
Yeah.
So, it's prepare for the meeting, have the meeting, make sure we capture what's important to people, and then review and recap and go forward. So that's the summation of my best practice on meetings.
And Darrell, that in the context of Microsoft Loop, how have you seen? You probably use this yourself as well. How have you seen the life cycle of a meeting? So preparing, during, and post meeting around the new collaborative notes with Microsoft Loop.
It's actually making that process a little easier than what Matt's described. I did the same thing definitely with OneNote, where I would like to prepare people for the meeting and provide links to things they might want to read to prepare, and have an agenda and a couple of thoughts as well. And being able to drop that OneNote link in there so that people could find their way to it was super important. Where collaborative notes is helpful from a Loop and Teams perspective is they actually custom fit and built that into the experience of Teams, and that's quite nice. That you can go in and as you're creating the meeting, that you could add a Loop space. It already has a couple of three things that are added as what you might want to have in your notes: your agenda, a space for notes, and follow-up tasks. And so it's starting to lead people through. As soon as they click on that add notes to my meeting, it's leading them into some good practice. especially around having that agenda. So that's the beginning of the cycle. Now, it is relatively new. It's still actually rolling out to a number of organizations. So that's a habit to form. And to Matt's point too, it is beyond technology. It's actually down to individuals and meeting organizers to form these practices for themselves. That how can they prepare the people that they're inviting to have an easier experience for joining that meeting, and even before they join, can they glance at the meeting invite and just quickly get into the zone before they start to attend and participate. So lots of meeting practices there. So that starts that life cycle. Again, like early on, we could add loops and loop components to a Teams chat, and a Teams chat is also the meeting chat. But it wasn't a great experience because when you add a loop to that chat, it can disappear up the screen as people continue to type. It didn't really sort of fit in that sort of thin sliver of a chat space that was you felt kind of constricted. So whatever notes you were taking there, it just didn't look right either. But the collaborative notes are again powered by Loop, but they're sort of layout and formatted better. So the experience as you come into that meeting now, if an organizer has added them, they'll be there and available, and you can click on a button to make them appear, and have the chat and then switch between notes and chat. If you haven't added them, then they can be added to the meeting. I'll pause and say this too, like something overall in terms of the Loop experience, which I guess leaves us with a bit of a gap at the moment, is that we can't share loops with people outside of our organization. So this is actually quite a gap for bringing people into our meetings who might be guests, who might be participating from other organizations. We can't have notes shared with them from Loop, whereas we can with a OneNote if it's in the right space. So if you see that life cycle, cool, it's great for internal people and internal meetings, but not yet an inclusive experience for external people as well.
Yeah.
As you follow that through life cycle, you've taken some notes, and like I could talk a bit more about that, but I won't because I want this thing to flow. I did a recent video and experiment with Daniel Glenn because we wanted to sort of show a bit about, well, what does collaborative note taking actually look like? And Matt talked about this earlier too. If all three of us were taking notes, this actually happens in OneNote when you have it open. You've got these bounding boxes where you start to take notes, and they can be put anywhere on the page. And sometimes you have furious note takers that are flat out taking their notes, and it's almost like they're showing, look, I can touch type, I can take everything with a bus, but they're probably not as active or listening to the meeting as you said earlier. And then for that person, and someone else was probably trying to participate, but they thought, I'll leave that up to them. I don't want to mess up their notes. I'll start my own little bounding box out over here. And sometimes you can have all these little boxes sort of in different places. But the end result is, you get a collaborative viewpoint from different people of what was important to them. And that person who took everything down probably felt like they were the transfer over. So back to Loop. Afterwards, the cool thing about it is, again, it's fitted and finished inside the Teams experience. It's actually something you can go back to in the Teams meeting and see those notes and where they were taken. And, all of this is live, so you can continue to add to them and manage your follow-up tasks afterwards, and your tasks that synchronize over to Planner and To-Do. That's cool too. So a lot of thoughts going into it, but it's early days. People are still developing those habits around how to use it for the meeting life cycle.
Yeah. So do you think, Darrell, I'm going to assume that you've been using Loop for meeting, since the collaborative notes have been rolled out to your tenant. I'm assuming you've been using these. Do you see, or are you using both? You used to be OneNote as well. So do you see a use for both of these applications in note taking?
I think the landscape or experience of me in OneNote has changed over the years, and it's partly like OneNote has been a leading product for a number of things, and it was first to do a lot of things. One of the first that it was achieved was Windows at one point went to going to, what was it called, a UWP, Universal Windows App or something. Yeah. So they were first to do that, and in fact the web experience that we have of OneNote today is very much based on that. It stepped away from the traditional way that a structured notebook was, and it came back to that. And look, over time, I think, like with various different ways that they change the database in the background to keep the notes in sync and all that, the synchronization has not been as real time. Far from it now, actually, but it used to be really, really slick. So what's happened for me and for I guess a few ways of looking at OneNote now is it is more about your personal notes for your experience of a meeting, and for me at least less about taking collaborative notes together. So what we're seeing in terms of how Loop and OneNote is being positioned is we know that OneNote for your personal notes, and Loop will actually be able to embed inside a OneNote page. So imagine the notes that we've taken, but we can have our tablets beside us, and we can be inking alongside the notes inside this embedded Loop sitting inside my OneNote page. So it's not available yet, but I think that's going to be an interesting picture for collaborative note taking, and then maybe things that you might want to capture alongside that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Matt, in the context of meetings, do you see a lot of the collaborative nature of OneNote? So multiple people being in the same page and doing all the collaboration during a meeting in OneNote? Yes,
I mean, we do. I mean, I've got about, and look, I'm obviously biased in this space. I've been using OneNote for 20 years, right? So I'm a wedded-on, barnacle-like OneNote user. And to Darrell's point, that UWP transition that OneNote went through, it was interesting and good on them for trying it, but it really did muck up the OneNote waters or muddied them quite badly. I do have to say, though, that the engineering team at OneNote have done an amazing job of getting it to where it is. And that real-time collaboration is pretty much back. Definitely and my understanding is that they spent something like 30 plus engineering years on rewriting the code of OneNote to bring it up to a modern desktop application. So that's pretty incredible amount of time, millions of lines of code. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was an incredible re-engineering feat to get the combination of UWP features and desktop back together, which most people should have had rolled out by now. Maybe some people are still lagging. There's a lot changing in Office across the board at the moment, isn't there? But this is one of those things. But of those notebooks, about 35 notebooks open, every single notebook is shared with different groups of people. So all of my notebooks, except for one, are shared with others. So a shared note-taking space is the primary reason I have OneNote, because my paper diary, my paper notes, I wanted to share them I used to be in construction. My background is as a builder. I would go to a customer site and I would take notes in my diary or on paper. And how did I share them with other people? I had to go to an office and type them up. That's what I had to do. So being able to write those into OneNote and share them with my team live, even if it was 30 seconds of lag time back then or a minute, was just an incredible change to workflow. So I love the concept of the Loop component being live and updated no matter where it lives, and being able to ink next to it, preferably over it, would be my number one wish, right? Because a pen is the natural creative tool of the human body. That's and the human mind. That's the reality of it. So everybody thinks visually and creates visually. When we use keyboards, we only think with the audio part of our mind. So we're just limiting so much to be stuck with a keyboard in these. But I'm probably, Darrell's the best person to ask. I mean, how much real-time collaboration in a Loop component are you experiencing when you're working with others? I'm not sure how much that is.
That's exactly the next question I was going to ask, because you see all the marketing stuff and you see all the bits and pieces bobbling around and the emotions. Yes, that's a heart. That's we'll thumb that up. We'll comment here. But in reality, is that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Look,
Yeah.
I've, to be honest, still have tried to use OneNote at the same time as someone, like making show notes for the weekly show I do with Daniel Glenn, where we'd be both in the OneNote web version, adding our updates about the thing we're going to talk about. And is it synchronized for you yet? No, okay, let's just wait. Or even today's experience where I was taking some notes during a training and got those conflicts and those pages doubling up. So that was that's been my struggle with the OneNote real-time note-taking. The question of, like, do we take notes together or do we use the same page co-authoring very frequently? In a lot of meetings that I add Loop to, it does. If it's someone new to that experience, they, like with a lot of things, I don't know if I can type into that same space that you are. It doesn't feel, I might be interrupting you. But as people get used to it, and you're inviting people to, hey, that was a great idea. Why don't you just add that to write that down and write that table down? It happens. It doesn't happen in the way that the marketing videos do it, like these 5 or 6 cursors flying along the page and people type in at 90 words per minute. Yeah, right, whatever. But more about taking those things that are important to you and capturing those. And like, just as a tip, I think I've found the table in a loop to be super helpful. I know I take
Very
notes on tables as well in OneNote, but it still gives people that space, but it still gives you that ability to organize and shuffle things around if you need to.
Yeah.
Do you see, I'm interested to hear, do you see chat as distracting in Teams meetings, or do you think it helps people focus on content?
Chat. It is a distraction. And certainly certain types of meetings as well, where someone's presenting and you've got almost like this threaded conversation going on in the chat where they're still talking about the thing that was presented 30 seconds ago to 5 minutes ago. That sort of thing happens. And, the same, I guess, could be said about notes too. If people are trying to write a novel about something that was quite inspirational, that was spoken about beforehand. And I mean, perhaps even looking at live cursors flying along the page could be distracting too. But that's an interesting thought, right? Because we're also seeing a trend of more stuff coming into that live stage that's in Teams, PowerPoint Live, now it's Excel Live, and we've got a whiteboard that we can bring in there, and that's live and it's a shared experience. I think it's down to how people work, the way that they work, and the culture that is built sometimes for just the length of the meeting, because it could be just certain people in that meeting that don't often meet together.
I find it a really fascinating question because again, the research that we look at, we're not effective multitaskers. The human brain is not built to multitask. So, even in PowerPoint Live, I find myself, I can't help it. I'm skipping through. I'm 30 slides ahead of where you are in the meeting. I want to know what's next.
Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. But, then something will twig in the back of your head because you heard a keyword and you quickly go back to presenter. And now I've missed out on what was said because, I'm 35 slides ahead of the 50 slide deck.
Yeah. I mean, that happens. That happens with chat as well. I know in meetings, and people would be talking about probably something that's not even relevant to the meeting, trying to, I don't know, whether it's put emojis in or make jokes or, do something else because maybe the content isn't, keeping their attention or whatever. But then, they're chatting away and you're engaging in that conversation too. And then something sparks your interest and you think, oh, what was said? And then you've missed the entire sort of preamble to what was actually being said.
So the question that I have then on the back of that is, is note take, what type of a meeting are we having? So if it's an initial ideation session, then we might treat it a bit differently than if we've had the ideation session, we've got some key points and we now need to build some content around that. Right? So that's the way I have been looking at this because, my first reaction to Loop was, this is a poor man's OneNote. And that's not fair and it's not true, right? Whereas now what I'm looking forward to is, hey, maybe we have an ideation session and we just capture the key points and the directions we want to take, but now we need to go and build. And I know that in my workflow, I work with my brother a lot. And so we'll be on a Teams call together, building stuff live. It's not so much conversation other than about the points that we're both contributing to the topics. And so I see, you could do the ideation session in a whiteboard, for example, in the Teams call, or we could do it in OneNote, genuine ideation, images and ink, and then, okay, it's built. So maybe we start that in the first meeting, maybe we don't. But these components that we build that can then plug into other spaces, I really see the value here. So we're helping create something that we can progress forward without redoing our effort or rebuilding.
So, yeah, I think removing the friction of what you're trying to do. I mean, having a tool and an easy tool that reduces the friction to ideate, or even things, it aligns itself a little bit to, getting things out of your head and trying to get things down on paper and that type of thing. If you've got a frictionless way to do that, whether it's, OneNote on your phone, Loop on your phone, regardless of where you are, as long as there's reduced friction and a tool, regardless of the tool it is, I think removing that type of friction is a good result, I think.
There's something, I'll say it's a related point, but about friction. And it actually comes back to the sensation of writing with a pen. In fact, like I've got an iPad. I've put a layer across called paper-like, which makes it feel like it's more like paper. But there's good friction. I mean, there's good reasons for getting rid of certain types of friction. And then there's the friction that I think writing with a pen introduces and helps. And, Matt will be back up on probably the same research, actually, where because we're slowing down and we're having to write this thing, we're actually having to process whatever we're thinking about a bit more. So in a meeting, the notes that we are taking are not about capturing every word, but what was important to me, and I'm thinking about it and it's flowing, and that's cool. Whereas typing away on a keyboard, I grew up looking at a poster in my dad and stepmom's kitchen at the back of the, above the sink. I live like a type, fast with a lot of mistakes. And I often think about that when I'm taking notes, and people are watching me when I'm doing demo and I'm typing away, and I get like this typer's anxiety where you make more mistakes because people are watching you. But it's so disruptive to your thinking, isn't it? Where you're trying to you want to just get that thing, but you're typing away. Oh, wrong, backspace, type. Oh, that was supposed to be a capital. Okay, where's the thought? There's a whole lot of friction there.
It is, and you're absolutely right there, Darrell. And you are actually encoding memories when you draw or write, and they're the same mental process. And the human brain is not left-hand justified linear. That's not the way it works, right? So being able to randomly capture things and put them down, and when you do recall, so I think about it, I recall it, you encode it, I write it or draw it. That's that process. It's so powerful. And I love that saying, live fast and make lots of mistakes. And that's the reality of it. It's funny that people also feel the same way about their ink, particularly when we teach people to use a digital whiteboard. People say, no, I don't want to, I can't write and I can't draw. I'm too messy. Don't let me do it in front of an audience. This is, again, about the coaching aspect, right? Your ideas are important. We need to see them. I don't care about the quality of your handwriting or the quality of your stick figures. I just need to see them. However, the other interesting point to this is when I do see the typing mistake, I'm compelled to correct it. Yes. I'm less compelled when it's in ink. It's just we're more forgiving when we see people's ink than we are their typing. Probably off topic a bit there.
So, all that being said, what do people use? What do we use? I mean, we've got OneNote, we've got Loop. What's your advice on what, should we use one or the other? Should we use both? We kind of, I don't really like the use this or that. It's kind of a this and that type of thing. But what would your advice be, Darrell? I'll start with you. What would your advice be to people? Why use Loop?
No, I think we should introduce Notepad back into the conversation.
Oh, well, actually, before, yes, true, because you've got your notes for this, or a whiteboard. You've got your notes in Loop. Matt's got his in OneNote, and I have mine in Notepad.
Yeah.
So we've got actually three different note-taking applications there already. Yeah. Do you think it's personal preference? Do we need to make a group decision? You know, if we're working as a team, you know, we don't want to have notes in Loop, notes in OneNote, notes in a Word doc, that type of thing.
Yeah. Look, again, what's the purpose of the notes? If it's my personal note taking, I might have an app on my iPad that just helps me ink, and I'm happy with that. If I intend for it to be shared with other people, and you know, our team has developed some working habits around using OneNote, then cool, use that. If you're trying out Loop and you're seeing some value in being able to also share that content in other places and keep that up to date, use that. I think what we're starting to see, and this is kind of my big hope for the Microsoft suite, Microsoft 365 suite in general, is there was this dream at some point that it wouldn't matter too much what tool we use, but that we have the ability to do what we need to do wherever we are, and we can then share it and use it wherever we are. And like Loop uses a technology underneath called the Fluid Framework, and I've heard that Word and Excel and some of the other real-time application experiences are also using it. They've been written to that's how the real-time co-authoring actually works, using Fluid. That wouldn't it be great if it actually didn't matter what app we were choosing, but we could do what we needed to do and bring in a piece of whatever we needed to from wherever we're working. I think that's what we're starting to see is if your team started taking notes in OneNote and that's the collaborative thing, cool. But like Matt said, maybe you see the value in creating a list of tasks over here and some bullet points and a few outlines over there, and you could just sort of put them on your OneNote collage and ink it all together and say, do this, do that, and it would all just work. Yeah, I think we develop our own way as we work together as a team. It's more important that we do that and sort of work together to find what works for us than it is about.
I think that's it is. I mean, that's the perfect point. Is that, you know, Microsoft 365 offers so many different ways to do things. People a lot of times want almost a black and white answer. Do we use this or do we use that? I mean, it is up, and we're all consultants. It depends. You can do things a lot of different ways. So I think personally having that flexibility is a good thing, because you can choose which way you want to do that.
But personal preference is interesting, and obviously when we're working by ourselves, we can do whatever we like, right? But I think that high-performing teams always have a team-first approach, and if we are working in a team of people, then we have to have a team-first communication strategy, and that means, have we done the work? We're again talking about doing the work pre. Have we done the work as a group of people to identify how we're going to communicate and build? How are we going to work together? If we haven't done that, it doesn't matter what I want to use and what Darrell and you use, because we're not going to be on the same page regardless. And we're going to spend our whole time together trying to get on the same page. So, you know, I would say the answer is, have you worked out with your team how you're going to work with what tools? And my second point to that is, do you have a shared ideation space? Because people's ideas are valuable. And again, the research says that you remember, understand, and conceptualize between 9 and 60% better with a pen than you possibly can with a keyboard, and you can't bridge the gap. So have we got that catered for in our suite of tools? Is that whiteboard? Is it OneNote? Is it some other magical tool you've got that you've found? Fantastic. But are we capturing people's ideas and making that a part of our workflow as well?
And do you think having that written down somewhere or published somewhere as a this is our way of working for our given group?
Could be a Loop bullet list.
Could be. Could be.
Like it's often been suggested to add a tab to the team that you're working in, like different types of teams, of course. One that you persistently work in as a department, for example, or a project team. But maybe a project team is a good way to think about that. A good project will kick off and say, here's how we're going to work together. We're going to keep our documents here. We're going to have meetings on this cadence. We're going to store or have our conversations over here. We probably need to do that more often in other types of teams that we work in, and have that as a page, a OneNote, a SharePoint page pinned as a tab. SharePoint focus. How about that? Just the main thing is that you have got it written down, but it doesn't have to be some perfect contract. It's just there as a shared understanding.
I love thinking of this in sporting terms. So Dan and I both follow the AFL, and we both follow the same team, funnily enough. But, any good coach has a review process, and it's not a one-way. It's not always, I'm going to tell you how we're going to work. It's got to be, how are you guys going with this? Is it working? What do we need to change and tweak? So do we have a regular review process built into our communication agreement, whatever you want to call it? Because there's no point having the bullet points if no one follows them. So, and do we hold each other to that communication standard? Hey, we said we would put that here, not an email. Hey, can you get it back in email for me, please? Do we have that genuine team first focus that's more than just setting the standard? It's actually driving the workflow and finding ways to improve it on the way through. And I just think that with tools like Loop, which are going to be changing on a daily, if not weekly basis as they get more and more developed, that it's really important that we do that review, because someone who's been using OneNote for 20 years has to find a way to find out what else there is. We've got to be open to the possibility that there might be a better way that helps other people get more involved in our teamwork.
Speaking about new stuff and finding out different ways to do things, we've got this thing called Copilot that's been talked about and advertised and marketed very widely. Given what you can say about it and what you've seen, how do you see that changing? If we look at the context of note taking, for example, inside of meetings, how do you see that fitting in to this gamut of things that we've got?
I'll jump off. I'm looking forward to Copilot in OneNote in particular. I've got 20 years worth of research here that I would love Copilot to summarize for me by topic or by, that would be just phenomenal resource. Yeah.
So those that don't know, what functionality from Copilot's coming into OneNote? What are you going to be able to do?
Well, essentially we're talking about a text prediction engine, really, aren't we? Right, but it's about digesting information that you can find in the container you give it access to. I'm not an expert in this, so I hope I get this right. And then giving you a summary of it. So, can you summarize this for me? I know that if I had to go through my research notebook in OneNote, it would take me years to go through that research and find out the common threads. In fact, because of the way we collect things, I'm sure I've got the same article in there a half a dozen times in different sections. So just how do I summarize that content? The cool thing is I've got it in OneNote so I can summarize it, right? Whereas if it was in my paper notebooks, good luck, although we have ways around that too, thanks to OneNote and OCR. But yeah, like that ability to capture a body of work. I've seen some good examples in the workforce, but maybe before I talk about those, I get Darrell's opinion on what he thinks about Copilot as well.
Look, we've seen early examples of how Copilot will appear in various different Microsoft 365 applications. It often seems to be presented as either like a summary tool or a starter tool, like give me a list of 10 things that I could use for a quiz for my course that I'm going to run. Or whatever. And it's drawing from different sources. Copilot also, I'll say this, within Microsoft 365, I think the goal is that it's also about being able to reuse and repurpose the knowledge that's available within your organization. And there'll be some challenges around that. What I think I'm looking forward to, apart from the summarizing thing, is seeing how well it does deal with those boundaries and what's within our organization. being able to discover things that I have permission to, of course, but being able to summarize a couple of meetings or pull together tasks from certain things. Maybe I'd point it to, or it might discover some things in a folder called, courses on, I don't know, baking or something, whatever, if I was a baking industry. And it would take all of that content and learn from and use that. So yeah, the technology behind that's kind of cool. What we have seen in demos so far, I've seen in the Loop space, and I think it's true too of OneNote as well, is that there's actually a way to collaborate with Copilot itself. So at the moment, one-on-one, I can feed it a prompt and it'll come back, and then I can say, no, have another go. I actually want a bit more detail on that. But you can do that with us three together. And it's like we're chatting with that fourth person that Matt thought we had earlier, that Copilot is that, okay, I'll take that on board. And Daniel says, no, I want it to be a bit more colorful language. Well, maybe not. You know what I mean by colorful.
Yeah.
Just make it more vibrant. We're seeing a lot of hopes and dreams in things that are being demonstrated. It's just, we're yet to see realities yet in terms of what will land.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing, or what I'm hearing as well, is I think it's going to help create a lot of content as well inside of all organizations, and share a lot more of that content, because it's going to be easier to access, easier to create. I'm talking more from a SharePoint side of things, being able to easily create content and talk to your co-pilot, your assistant, to be able to actually get that message out and actually communicate out a lot more, where people are probably a little bit hesitant or not know how to do something, whereas you're going to be able to, hopefully you're going to be able to make that a hell of a lot easier for people to be able to do over and above just your summaries and things like that. So actually creating stuff is going to be pretty exciting to see as well.
I think there's a massive benefit for organisations, particularly government organisations that are involved in investigations and that sort of process, inspections, investigations, because at the moment, if I'm an inspector for a function in government and I write notes into my personal diary and I build a library of personal knowledge because of my experience, it's been funded by the public over a number of years. When I leave, when I retire from that organisation or I take another job, what happened to the knowledge that I was funded to build? Is it in any way retained by the organisation? The answer is no. But if we can encourage people to take digital notes, right, even if they are in their own workspaces, but we can make that that key corporate knowledge available to the next person in the role, I think that's where Copilot's got a role to play, and a broader benefit. Firstly, it's up to us to help people take digital notes instead of physical notes so we can actually benefit from that knowledge. And then secondly, can we make that learning available in summary form to people, in the future? Because we don't want to have to keep reinventing the wheel from a knowledge perspective, but the reality is that our organisations do this every day because knowledge is not retained. It becomes personalised, and the expertise is given to the person and not back to the entity.
And it's almost like that expert has to be around to translate and step you through the structure of their knowledge. Much like when you're invited to a team or a team site or something like that, and you're trying to get familiar with the folder structure of how these people work. Yeah, I agree. Like Copilot could help with that.
Yeah. Well, if we circle, look, we're almost at the top of the hour now. But if we circle back around to the topic we're talking about, although we've got multiple different products to do or apps to do what we're trying to do around note taking in teams. I think the general consensus would probably be that we need to think about the processes and what we're actually doing to start with as well. And both tools and both applications have a big role to play in that. So, and again, it is kind of an it depends type of scenario. I would think. So, would you agree on that?
I think it's important that we take notes, right? And that we take notes in meetings. Absolutely. Where you take those notes, it's got to be a team decision. It's got to be in the best interest of the team. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the team has to keep looking at what is this actually working for us? Is this causing us duplication of effort, or are we actually able to flow on? To use the word friction, is there friction in the way we're working, and what tools can we use to fix that? I think that's the formula, I think, of effective teamwork.
Yeah,
I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll expand a little outside, well, making it still a related topic, that we need to make more time to do that. Yeah. Like these are things that Matt said that we do need to do. We need to reevaluate how we work and see how we can improve how we work as a team. Make time to do that. It's important. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, look, guys, it's been an amazing conversation, as I thought it would be. Great to catch up with both of you. Both of you have, a lot of insight into different areas, but the topic in general, I think you share a lot of, similar thoughts and that type of thing. So thank you very much for joining and jumping into the studio today. Now, I'll start with you, Matt. If people want to find out more about yourself and everything that you do, where is the best place for people to contact you and follow you?
You can find me on Twitter. It's at Matt Gilbertson, just one T in Matt. And also email. It's pretty easy. It's mgilbertson mgilbertson@asi.com.au. LinkedIn, of course, Matthew Gilbertson as well. They're probably the three ways people most contact me from external sources that don't already know me. Happy to help anyone out with questions on any topic that we've covered, or others as well, like you guys are.
Very good. And Darrell, probably not that hard to find, but where can people find you? Now, you've recently jumped out on your own and you've got your own workplace mentor, I think it's called now, isn't it?
Yep.
You are?
modernworkmentor.com. Yeah, you'll find
Modern
me.
Work Mentor.
Find me there. Yeah, it's the website, it's the channel. I am also known out in social circles as Darrell as a service. So I'm the greedy one, the way that I spell my name. It's like Darren, 2 R's, an E and 2 L's. But you'll get there. Just write Darrell as a service, you'll find it. And recently I've stepped out onto Threads. Ooh. Anyway, no. It's more like a silly social platform. The fun thing is, I think we three are all like this. You'll find us in different places because we like to be part of conversations. We learn as a community. We connect with people, and you'll find us lurking and connecting.
And I want to shout out to your videos on Loop, Darrell. They're awesome, and they've taught me most of what I know about Loop. Yeah. So keep going with that content. It's awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Cool.
Yes, amazing stuff. Well, once again, guys, thank you very much for jumping in, having great chat, and all links and everything that you need to find will be in the show notes. So if you need to or want to follow these two, then jump down there and you will find them all there. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.